Hello, my name is Christen Carter. I own Busy Beaver Button Company. We make millions of buttons every year, and the last couple of years I've been working on the Button Museum. And during this whole research, I've learned a lot about buttons I never knew before. Like, I'm going to share with you just a few things today, like a little background on the button, and then a few cultural things I didn't know, maybe you did know, maybe you didn't, and then introduce you to some of my button collector friends that I've made over the years. Well, basically, the word button just means something that sticks out. So there's a lot of buttons in this world. I mean, in French, a pimple is a button. And then we have clothing fasteners. We've got, video game buttons and virtual buttons. But here we're talking about the pinback button. Its lineage, it starts with the George Washington inaugural celebration, hand-engraved buttons. And, eventually, by the time Abraham Lincoln came around, it was a pinback. I mean, there were some non-pinbacks, but that's when the pinback happened. And then Grover Cleveland, the first time around, there's like a brass ring with glass over it. And actually, it's a $1,000 bill. I didn't even know it existed. It's the same one that we have in the Button Museum, same image of Grover Cleveland. There's actually a $100,000 bill from 1937. I didn't know that existed. But then in 1896, there was a patent for it. And both McKinley and Bryan used them for their campaigns in 1896. So these are, we got McKinley up there and Bryan. And then it was just so rare and special for people to own visual object, own printed objects. They're like part of something. So advertisers used them, and if you couldn't ride like a railroad, you could have a button of a railroad car. And it was just printed beautifully. This is actually the first band button ever. We're famous for our band buttons, but in 1903, the Roney's Boys, it's a Chicago band. This guy, he took wayward boys, taught them hymns. They played prisons. They played the White House. And there was also around the same time, beautiful Jim Key was a traveling horse who he could use a cash register. He could count. He could spell. Millions of people saw him. Like the nation loved this horse. This I brought out for you guys. It's a handheld computer from the early 1900s. Just so beautifully illustrated. It looks teeny too. It does complementary algebra. That's what's so special about this one in particular. 1912, everyone wanted good roads. Bikes were popular. Cars were getting popular. And so that's why in 1913 we started having income tax. I didn't know that. And then this is, from Prohibition era, but it's timeless. This looks like a nice button. You're like, okay, this is like a lady looking at herself, but you look on it's a metamorphic. If you look at this side, cover her hand and head, and she's doing something very naughty. Drive carefully, Dr. Bernard is waiting. Who's Dr. Bernard? Why do I need to drive carefully? Well, basically, Christian Bernard was the first person to do a heart transplant. So this is kind of a little be careful or else someone's going to take your heart and put it into somebody else. When the first men walked on the moon, Michael Collins, the guy in the middle here, stayed in the shuttle while the other guys walked on the moon, and his parting words were, "You cats, take it easy on the lunar surface." I didn't know that before I collected buttons. Okay, while many people have walked around naked for years, 1974 was a year streaking really broke. And there's so many streaking buttons, which is funny because you think, where do they wear them? But it's on the Oscars. In 1981, Dan Goodwin, Spider-Man who climbed the Hancock Tower, and the fire marshal wanted to water him down, and then Jane Byrne came in. She also lived in Cabrini Green for a while and came in and stopped them from doing this. This is a little philosophical moment we can all think about. What would happen if the whole world farted at once? And then people I've met through button collecting. You go to these button collecting hotels, and people talk about the history and all the things that they do, why they got their buttons. And then you meet McKinley, people dressed as McKinley, and they always went the Busy Beaver there. And then this is actually my button mentor, Ted Hake, and his wife Janelle, my brother Joel, and a guy named Larry Bird. He works at the Smithsonian, and all these are full of buttons. And then actually here's a little Busy Beaver button. We found a Busy Beaver button at the Smithsonian. And then these are some of my goofy button collector buddies that I would have never met these guys had I not started the Button Museum. And they're, I learned so much about them, and they're really passionate, interesting people like all of you guys. So, I'm very thankful.